Folklore Hunter is a first-person survival horror hunting game where you and your friends hunt mythical beings. The game is in early access and available on Steam. Atmosphere. The game is currently split into two maps, with a third planned in the future. The first map sees you hunting a Wendigo, and the second sees you tracking down 3 Strigoi. Both maps feature large forested areas with day-night cycles to get dramatically more tense during the night, but the second map manages to be more eerie thanks to all the abandoned houses and the increasing number of monsters. Even in multiplayer, the tension remains because you're always on guard and the eerie quietness of the forest persists. There's also some tension generated by resource management. Whilst you can find crates with randomized supplies, running out of healing items, batteries for the flashlight, or more importantly ammo for your gun, leaves you in a very bad place, especially on the second map. The game is devoid of a save feature as well, so each map or hunt is intended to be done in a single sitting, and this again increases the tension and pressure to get the job done. But what makes the whole thing fall apart is the game's bugs, which we only really encountered one whilst playing, but it was pretty devastating. After defeating the first 2 Strigoi in the second map, the third would disappear and seemingly never reappear. We attempted the second map 3 times before finally being successful in defeating all of the Strigoi, but the time spent hunting the final Strigoi in our previous attempts was nearly 4 hours of meandering before we gave up. This time was intensely boring and disappointing. I looked up a solution and the developer said to someone else in the same situation that they were working on it several months before we started playing, and we encountered the bug in 2 out of the 3 attempts we made, and it completely ruined the atmosphere. It's a shame because otherwise the second map would be the much more enjoyable of the 2. That's no Harry Masons. Scares. In the first map, the scares mostly come from the Wendigo itself. Its roars are very loud and sometimes come out of nowhere. Whilst it can appear on the cameras you can place around the environments, it moves very quickly and it's easy to lose it, or have it sneak up on you. There's other strange sounds in the woods from children's ghostly voices and other creepy and strange events that took both of us by surprise and opened the door to more bizarre things, but sadly as the game went on it didn't build on any of the fantastical elements that happened during the mid-game. As for the second map, there's a lot of the same things with the Strigoi attacking you out of nowhere and appearing on the cameras, but sometimes you'll get a Blood Mist Night which has the game throw tons of Strigoi at you that die in a single hit. It's incredibly stressful and takes a lot of your limited resources to keep fighting back, but as the night progresses they eventually became more tiring due to the repetition of when the AI of the Strigoi bugged out. In single player, fighting the Strigoi is much harder and shooting them a couple of times usually results in them chasing them off, but it seems to be a random number of shots before it retreats, meaning you can pour bullets into them before they'll stop attacking you, which at that point it just might be too late. There are some other creepy moments where we discovered a floating shadow that eluded us until later, where we discovered some lore that explained it. Overall, the game has some really frightening moments that come with dealing with the enemies and a few other things that sweeten the deal, though they are a bit sparse. That's one Harry Mason. Sound design. During the gameplay there's not much music, just a looping forest ambiance with birds chirping and the wind rustling through the trees. It's very realistic and quite impressive, but after about 10 minutes or so it fades out and then restarts, which can kind of take you out the moment for a little bit since so much of the forest's realism relies on the ambiance. There's the low hum that starts when an enemy is near, and it really puts you on edge for an impending attack, along with other long droning noises that seem to crop up at random during the night, and it always gives you the impression that something is coming. The game uses a lot of generic sound effects for the weaponry and bear traps, but the screams of the monsters, especially the Strigoi, are pretty harrowing. There's no voice acting, and the game does a pretty good job with the directional audio, reverb, and the general sound design overall, even if there isn't that much there. That's 2 Harry Masons. Gore. There's some blood in the second map, but no bodies, which is odd, and it feels like there should have been more than just a few patches of blood to justify the events of the story, or more effort gone into making the blood serve a purpose in the environmental storytelling. The real shame though is that the Strigoi and Wendigo don't bleed when shot, which is a little disappointing considering how much effort goes into hunting them. The game also has a hunter sense mode that lets you track things, sort of, and more could have been done with that to hunting blood trails as well. The game sets up a lot, but it doesn't really deliver on a lot of the things that it sets up. That's still 2 Harry Masons. Story. The story of both scenarios is more than just hunt the creature, and there's a lot of interesting plot twists during your time exploring the environments, but sadly the game doesn't always build on them. There's a lot of notes laying around that are vaguely eerie, and some of them clearly had some effort put into making them. In the second map there were a few spooky things that tied into the story that were pretty interesting, involving the shadows, but the shadows themselves were very easy to miss. Really, the story didn't matter a whole lot as it takes a back seat to the hunting, but the endings to the game are pretty disappointing, being just white text on a black screen, and they don't provide a lot of closure on the events either, let alone explain some of the things that you've seen. The story has 1 or 2 interesting things, but it's largely ignorable, and the stuff that should be important feels like an afterthought, making the final score 2 out of 5 Harry Masons. Folklore Hunter has a lot of interesting ideas, but due to bugs and putting effort into the wrong things, the game feels like a chore to play. With no save feature, it's not something I'd recommend until they fix the bugs. Again, I'd like to remind you the whole thing is down to my opinion in horror games, and if you don't share this opinion, then that's cool, I get it. I'd like to point out that I really struggled, but I did not let the Strigoi get away, and advise you don't either. There will be more horror reviews in the pipeline, and thanks for watching. And always go check out Bumps in the Middle of the Night. Peace.